Welcome again to Authors and Innovators. I'm Larry Gennari from Gennari Aronson, and continuing with this year's theme around the changing shape of business, I'm delighted to welcome the authors of the fascinating new book, Your Brain on Art, How the Arts Transform Us. And I want to welcome the author. Susan Magsamen is the founder and director of the International Arts and Mind Club, the Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics at Johns Hopkins. She's also the co-director of the Aspen Institute's NeuroArts Blueprint. Her co-author is Ivy Ross, also an artist, and the VP of Design for Hardware Products at Google. And she's won a variety of awards for design, and she is still designing as we speak. So, Susan and Ivy, welcome. How did the two of you, Johns Hopkins, Google, how did the two of you come together, find each other to write this book?
Well, maybe I'll start and Ivy can jump in. At Johns Hopkins, I do run this Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics in the School of Medicine, which is a really weird place to be talking about the arts. But we had a donor, and still do, who believes that the arts can save us. And she inspired Hopkins through a very large donation to start to think about this in a very tangible way. And along the way, I wanted to lift up the work that was already being done in the field by architects, designers, musicians, and knew of Ivy's work. Many years ago, I sold a creative arts company to Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. And it was about the same time that Ivy was at Mattel running the girls division. And so years ago, when we were looking to put together something called a Luminary Scholars Group, I thought about Ivy. And so I literally blind linked in her, sort of like you would on a dating service.
I love that. So that works. That works.
Well, it did for us. And it did for my marriage, too, to be honest. But yes. And so, yes, so I reached out and I said, this is what I do. And I've known about your work for a really long time. And I would love to share this work that we're doing and see if you'd be interested.
And when Susan told me that neuroscience was discovering or validating what a lot of us creatives and designers knew intuitively, I'm like, I love science. I mean, in that science was validating the work that I do and many others do. And so we had a salon at my home between neuroscientists and artists, and it was an amazing conversation. At the end of that conversation, Susan looks at me and said, I've always wanted to write a book about this. Do you want to do it with me? And I said, yes, this is the book I've been waiting for.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. So there's so much that has been written about the brain and science and art separately. For our audience of entrepreneurs, business leaders, why do the arts matter, especially now?
Well, I think there's a couple reasons why the arts are so relevant right now. And I think one of them is that we have been really optimizing for productivity since the Industrial Revolution, thinking that was going to make us more innovative, more productive, more creative, but in fact, it hasn't. And we're really seeing rises in mental health, going beyond physical health. We're also seeing that coming out of the pandemic, there's huge issues around loneliness and isolation. And I think from a business point of view, what we're seeing is that our communities, our social fabric has really been very frayed, and really looking to try to think about how do we build community, how do we build connection, how do we build these creative teams, and how do we really think imaginatively about what we want to do, why do we want to do it, and why does that give us meaning? What is that purpose and meaning for us to be able to do that? And so I think it's no surprise that a book like ours would hit the New York Times in 6 days, because people are hungry for other ways of really coming to terms with what their life can be and tools to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think we've been very transactional, and we're really seeking, we really are looking for some things that are more transformational now. And so the irony is, the arts are actually our birthright, and they are something that, as culture way back when, we didn't even have a word for art because it was culture. I mean, singing, dancing, making art. I mean, that was just the way we lived. And there's a reason that we were designed to be that way. And I think we've, over the years, stopped engaging in the arts because we thought we either weren't good at it, we weren't going to make a living at it, not realizing that our physiology needs it, whether we're the maker or the beholder.
And I love in the book, you take the reader on a journey and you help them understand that art, and you define art broadly as well. And you talk about the impact on mental health, physical health. I was really taken with some of the examples in the book about how art can transform the way we think about people. Judith Scott was one of the folks that you profiled in the book. Maybe you could talk about her, as well as Aaron Miller, a firefighter dealing with PTSD. So I wonder if you could talk about those two use cases for our business audience and give them a sense of what they might expect about the connections you make in the book between art and people.
Yeah, Susan, why don't you talk about Judith and I'll talk about Aaron, the firefighter.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay. So, and I think maybe it's important to sort of level set to say that neuroaesthetics, which is really what the book is about, the science of this, is how the arts and aesthetics measurably change our brains, bodies, and behavior, and how this knowledge can be translated into specific practices, everyday practices, and also clinical practices that advance health and well-being. And so the frame of the book really looks at a neurobiological journey, and then we use these use cases to really amplify how, if you understand, as Ivy said, that the arts are our birthright and that we are literally wired for art. That's how we bring in the world, that the applications for this work are really profound. So in Judith's case, Judith is a twin, and Judith was born with very significant intellectual and physical disabilities. And her family decided that they couldn't care for her, and they put her in an institution, literally most of her young adult life. So it wasn't until she was almost 40 that her sister brought her out of the institution and had her work with a group called Creative Growth. Creative Growth is in Oakland, California, and they work with people with all kinds of differences, and they provide an open art studio, and they literally let people find their way, find their voice.
Wow.
An open studio. So, and it usually takes 2 years for someone to be able to unpack the trauma and the drama and the repression and the depression that's happened in their lives to begin to find their voice. So as you said, we broadly define arts as creative self-expression, and that's used for your own your own reflections and your own insights, but also how you share yourself with the world. So in Judith's case, she found fiber, she found yarn and fabric, and she started to create these amazing womb-like orbs that she could get her arms around, that were soft, that she could hug. And in her case, the work was shared in galleries and picked up by museums, and she really became a phenomenal artistic success. That doesn't have to happen for it to have had profound meaning for her, but it's really a beautiful story in the way that she found her voice and was able to share it.
Yeah, I just love, I want to talk about Aaron Miller, but you interviewed over 100 people for this book. There's so many, it's just jam-packed with great examples, and you really, it is one of those books, it's such a great topic where you just read story after story, connection after connection. Talk a little bit about Aaron Miller, because we've got someone who is not neurotypical, who connects with art, connects through art, but Aaron used it in a different way.
Yeah, so, we have traumas every day, micro traumas. There's major traumas in our life, and then there's these micro traumas. And I think we just keep, in fact, now they say the last 3 years, we've gone through more than people back in World War II did, because it's political, it's weather, it's unbelievable. And we don't even realize how it's affecting our physiology. And so this idea that the arts, and again, when we say arts, it's theater, it's dancing, it's singing, it's painting, is a form of self-expression. And if you can express what your emotion, and by the way, emotion is energy in motion, and you need to clear that energy out, it helps prevent you from getting ill. So with Aaron, there's a woman who started Art to Ashes, and she was taking frontline firemen coming out of blazing fires who had experienced trauma. I mean, they either had to leave someone behind, and in the case of Aaron, he would come home and his behavior with his family was not appropriate because you're carrying trauma with you.
Right.
So Art to Ashes, the firemen would come out of fires, and one example is she'd hand them a paintbrush and just say, paint, get that paint on that canvas. And again, in some cases, zero skill, but just the using it as a tool to get out whatever, even if you can't put words to it. Sometimes you can't, even in trauma, the Broca region of the brain shuts down. You cannot put words to it, but by expressing the feelings and getting that out through making something, the trauma is released. So Aaron he's going to other firehouses and teaching other firemen how to make things, how to paint, because it has really helped him. Absolutely. And the book, there was so much science to explain, but we wanted to do it through storytelling. So you're absolutely right. It's a combination of learning some of the physiology and science of why neuroaesthetics, which is really about taking in things through your sensory systems. I think we are so conditioned to, there's a quote we have in the book about, we think that we're thinking beings that have learned to feel, but we're actually feeling beings that have learned to think.
Isn't that true?
And when you think about that, it turns everything upside down, because we are so in our cognitive mind, and yet the truth is we are designed to be feeling beings first. So Susan can talk about some of the statistics of how many feelers and nerve endings there are in each finger, in our nose. I mean, we have to get out of our heads sometimes and get into our bodies and feel the world and take the world in through our senses.
Well,
and you cover a powerful example from close by to MIT, where you talked about the work of a neuroscience and both the sound and light impact for Alzheimer's patients. Susan, I'd love to hear more about that. I mean, I loved the description in the book. I kept returning to it. It's folded down. It's a great story, and I think our audience in particular will want to learn a lot about that. And for me, I left this trying to find that 40 hertz sound and make sure that I could play it every day.
Yeah. Just to add one point to what Ivy was saying about Aaron, to bring that story to a business context or to our daily lives, when she was talking about these small micro traumas or bigger traumas, firefighters are not dissimilar to us in that they're never out of the zone of highly stimulating experiences, right? They're always moving into literally a fire. Sometimes we think we're going into the fire, into the frying pan and all of that.
Right.
They don't see this as therapy. They see it as self-care. And I want to underscore that because I think there's an opportunity for all of us to think about not intervention, not therapy, but as practice, that we do these things every day so that we feel better and we are able to process all of the complexities of things that happen to us all the time. So I just wanted to add that. The story in Boston is really fascinating. Li Wei Sai is at MIT. She's a neuroscientist, and she had this concept that we would be able to use light and sound, 40 hertz light and sound, to be able to address Alzheimer's. And optogenetics is a huge and growing field that has really started to elucidate the ways that light affects our brains and bodies. And it makes sense because light is such a major factor in circadian rhythms and in all of the things that we do throughout our day. And so initially she started with rats, experimenting with different hertz and different sound and light hertz, and ultimately settled on 40 hertz, which is approximately the Earth's vibration, which I think is really interesting, and was able to figure out that when that combination was used over a period of time in this rodent population, they were able to see plaque and amyloid literally disintegrate and go out through the waste system in the brain.
Unbelievable.
Just
unbelievable.
And so now
So
she's doing it with
fascinating.
people, right? She's doing it with people, and it's literally, you can buy it in a store near you pretty soon, right? There's a actual apparatus, a device that she's created that is being used for patients who have Alzheimer's, and she's getting fantastic results. So, we're talking about curing a disease, not managing symptoms, but curing a disease through aesthetic experiences, and that's what's so profound.
I just found the entire book, so many of the chapters talk about art and as restorative, and it truly is. I want to talk about AI and this cover. So tell me a little bit how this came about and how AI figured into it.
Well, Refik Anadol is a fantastic digital artist. He actually, early on in his career, did an internship at Google where he really learned about algorithms, and then he applies that, and now he's quite famous. In fact, he just recently, we saw an article, the big dome that's in Las Vegas, they're taking his images. What he does is he'll, for example, in a museum, he'll have scanned thousands of images of all the images that a museum has, run an algorithm program that remixes those images. Wow. And so through these incredible designs, well, the cover there was actually the MRI brain scans of thousands of.
Oh my goodness! How appropriate! It's beautiful.
Yeah, well, that's why we used it, because it is. We always loved his art, but in this case, it was brain scans that were combined through an algorithm to come up with a new idea of what a brain might be. So that was the connection there. And when Susan just talked about practice, I want to say art is the highest form of meditation. And so when you talk about having a practice every day, and some of the things through this book that we have found out, just 25 minutes of art will lower cortisol. I mean, there's some real clear facts in the book that our goal was to, just like science has proven that exercising 20 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day and sleeping 7 hours a day is important, we now have the science to show that making art or beholding it 20 minutes a day needs to be part of that diet.
And you don't have to be good at it.
It's just jam-packed with great insights. You don't have to be good at it. Everyone can do it. One of the things that you also talk about is reading. So I'd love to hear, Susan and Ivy, what you're reading these days.
So ironically, I am reading, well, not ironically, but The Power of Sound, How to Be Healthy and Productive Using Music and Sound.
Wonderful.
It's actually a book I read years and years and years ago, because I've studied sound and vibration for about 40 years. But now this is a second edition, updated, so I'm looking for any new information.
Oh, that's terrific. And I think I had mentioned to you before we started Susan Rogers' book, This Is What It Sounds Like. We profiled last year in Authors and Innovators, has to get added to your stack. It's a wonderful book. Susan, tell me about what you're reading.
So I am reading a book called The Well-Gardened Mind, The Restorative Power of Nature by Sue Stewart-Smith. And it's just a gorgeous book about the science and the art of nature. And, we interviewed E.O. Wilson, who was an evolutionary biologist at Harvard, who talked with us about the fact that we were in nature 99.8% of humanity's existence. And so this need to be in nature, I think, is so profound. And this book is just really a beautiful sort of nod to that.
Wow. I can't wait to get that. And I want to thank Susan Magsamen and Ivy Ross for this terrific book and spending some time with us. For those folks who are taking in Authors and Innovators, you can get this at our independent bookseller, Wellesley Books, and our sponsor. Please do. It's a terrific read. Susan and Ivy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm hoping that people will start thinking differently and more about art.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so pleased to extend a warm Authors and Innovators welcome to B.K. Fulton, author of The Blueprint, Lessons for Living Your Best Life. Mr. Fulton is an entrepreneur, investor, and filmmaker, and most importantly, from my experience, a storyteller. He was previously an executive at Verizon, where he oversaw the Mid-Atlantic operations in Virginia and West Virginia. I want to talk a little bit about that. He's held senior leadership positions with the U.S. Department of Commerce, AOL, Time Warner, and the National Urban League. He now runs an independent film company, Solidify Productions, in and around his hometown of Richmond, Virginia. He's been an investor, a guide, a trusted advisor to countless entrepreneurs, and he's sharing some of his observations and experiences in this terrific new book, The Blueprint, which is a collection of editor's notes that he published in Soul Vision magazine. This is a magazine that BK founded, and he grew to more than 150,000 subscribers prior to moving on to other entrepreneurial ventures, including an upcoming movie with Samuel L. Jackson and Uma Thurman. Welcome, BK Fulton. I'm so pleased to finally get to talk with you and to meet you. I'm really interested in sharing your story with our author and innovators audience. Tell us a bit more about how you got started in business. And as you state in the book, you are not always on a leadership track.
Right. Well, Larry, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to our exchange for a little bit. But I got started in entrepreneurship actually really early, when I was like 10 years old, and used to cut grass as part of my dad's crew, and then decided when I was all of 10 that I wanted to have my own business. And because I couldn't drive, I needed him to drive me to the jobs. I needed his lawnmowers, his gas, and a few of his customers. And so my dad laughed about it. He said, yeah, okay. And so one guy, a guy named John Lawson, who runs the largest construction firm in Virginia, he became my first customer and is still a friend to this day. He's like my second dad. But, you know, so I've always had the entrepreneurial bug. But when I went to engineering school and then became a Sloan Fellow, went to graduate school and law school, I decided that maybe big business was the way I was going to go. And then after retiring from heading the Mid-Atlantic region for Verizon, which included Maryland, D.C., Delaware, and Washington, I then relocated back to Virginia and retired and started Solidify Productions because I wanted to be able to tell amazing stories, because it was stories about the success of my ancestors in particular that really put my life on rocket boosters. When I was at Virginia Tech studying engineering, I was flunking out fast. I mean, it was too many beautiful women, too much fun to have and playing ball and hanging out and dancing. It was cold in the winter, so I didn't like the cold, so I didn't want to go to class. And that is not a good formula for success. And so I went to the library to plan my escape. And I think it was divine. I ended up in the E185 section in any Dewey Decimal System. That's the section on black people. And I started reading about people like Lewis Latimer, whose family was from Virginia, and they ran away to Massachusetts, where he learned to draft and helped to create things like the filament for the light bulb, wrote the very first book on incandescence, drew the original patents for the telephone. And I'm like, wait a minute, a guy that looked like me, family from my home state, did that? I can do Virginia Tech. And so I went from the probations list to the dean's list to the board of directors. So lesson one, read the right stuff.
Right.
And
read.
Read, but not just any reading, because I was reading, but it wasn't the right stuff. And so once you start reading the right stuff, it pours into you. And for any human being, mirrors and windows are important. Early on, do you see yourself reflected in the stuff you're taking in? That helps you to figure out who you are in the world, where you fit in the world. And then once you're okay with you, you're able to look through windows, other people's lives, people that are in the human family, and say, if they did it, I can do it. And so you need both good role models, good windows, and good impressions, people that you relate to, showing you that you're okay, that you're enough. And when I wrote the book, I realized that not everybody gets that messaging. We get the standard, okay, read, you can be great, you can do whatever you want to do. And that all sounds good, but if you don't see yourself winning, it's hard to believe that you're winning. In fact, the science on this is that if you're a minority, you're more likely to see a cat, a dog, or a humanoid on the cover of a book. What's the problem with that? Um, if you identify with the character on the cover of a book, then you're 3 to 10 times more likely to believe that you can achieve what they did. And so when you rob people of the mirrors, you also rob them of some of what they can give back to society. It's a net deficit. And so we can help ourselves by investing in everybody, telling more stories, helping people to believe that they're enough. Every boy, every girl. I mean, I joined this nonprofit board called the National Center of Women's Innovations recently because not enough stories about women in science are being told.
Right.
And so the first woman we're honoring is Dr. Gladys West. Have you ever heard of Dr. Gladys West?
Yes.
Okay, well then you're a rare bird. But it happens to be the little African American woman from Virginia that invented GPS. GPS.
Yes. Yes.
And so you'll hear people say things like girls aren't good at math. That's nonsense, of course. And so if you invented GPS, you got to be pretty good at math to do that. And so, but again, it's the stories we tell. And the problem, Larry, is people fill their heads with stereotypes and presuppositions. And so you've got to counter that with solid information. That's why even as a successful person, I still read 5 to 7 books a month as a standard. And I keep growing, and the mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimension. So I love it.
And that's got to be what inspired you to do the Mr. Business series, because this is not your first book. You've written a whole series of children's books. One of our co-sponsors for this entire event is a nonprofit called American Student Assistance, helping middle school kids see themselves, know themselves, and make thoughtful choices about what's next. Yeah. And it strikes me that those books, what you're talking about, Gladys West, these are folks who are going to help them sort that out. Right. Earlier, the better.
The earlier, the better. The earlier, the better. As a matter of fact, if you can get them early, then you see more college participation, more AP class participation, interestingly, more entrepreneurial activity. So at the end of the day, readers become leaders, and plugging people in to these success formulas or the blueprint, like I wrote in the book, helps people to figure it out sooner. And when everybody brings the best version of themselves, it resolves in love. And that accelerates the cures for cancer, the cures for ALS, the cures for things that ails us. For us to go from whatever place to a better place, you got to put in the work. And part of that work is reading.
And BK, you've been a tech executive, so you, particularly based on your experience, you know the importance of tech to rural communities and to connecting people to those ideas. Yeah. Are you happy with the progress in Virginia, West Virginia, in the South generally, and then the U.S. overall in equipping rural communities and pulling those kids, that next generation, into these ideas? Can you comment on just the technology?
I think we can do better. I think that high-speed internet and mobile technology and the falling prices for the kind of equipment that allows you to connect and interact, all those things are good. I think we've got problems with what we're sending across the wires. We've had TV for a long time, but garbage in, garbage out. And so if you're just watching horror shows or crazy stuff or Jerry Springer type of stuff, then that's not going to be the kind of stuff that helps your mind to evolve to the best version of itself. And you've got to read some of the better works about how societies were built, how you run a company, what's great about this process or that process, so that you get the tools of our time, the tools needed to then use the technology, use this stuff to solve a problem, to advance a great idea. And so I'm happy with the technology, and I think we've got to work on the content.
You say in the book, BK, you want people to do something with their gifts. How do they even know? We all grow as people. We're all different people that when we're 50 versus when we're 20. How do people know their gifts? And I want you to speak directly to these entrepreneurs and figure out how to use them.
Yeah, sure. So your gifts are essentially the talents that you have or you hone. The fun thing is you can evolve the gifts. So if you want to be a writer, you have to sit down and write. If you want to make movies, at some point you got to work with people who made movies and work on something. Maybe you start with the short and you evolve to a feature. We're on our 20th film now, and 20 books and 3 Broadway shows, 2 of which have been #1, and we were nominated for 2 Tonys.
Yeah, amazing.
I didn't do that before I did it, and so having not done it is not a good excuse. And so one of the things is people have to set aside the excuses. What I did when I had this awakening and started performing better is I wrote a 60-year plan. And I basically looked at the lives of people that I respected. And then I said, okay, what are the common denominators for their life? And all of my people had college, so I knew I had to finish college. All of them were lawyers, so I went to law school. All of them worked in the Northeast at some point, so I ended up working in the Northeast for a while. And I retired on plan at 49 years, 348 days. I had a 50-year target, and I hit it.
Wow.
I actually was ahead of schedule.
And you did it.
And so anybody can do this. And what ends up happening is when you start to have a certain amount of success, people want to make you exceptional. It's easier to make one guy exceptional than to embrace that you didn't invest in all these other people who could have been successful too. And so part of the fallacy of the way we educate people is we kind of pick who's going to, do the best or who's going to get the most resources, and you stack the deck effectively. Whereas what I tell people is your better solution is to invest in everybody. Double down on education. Double down on internships. Double down on mentoring. Double down on exposure. Make the resources available. Show them how to do it. If they don't learn, we didn't teach. And so stop blaming the kids for the stuff the grown-ups didn't do.
BK, what do you want to tell budding entrepreneurs or even business students who might be in college, who might be thinking about an MBA? The world is changing. Technology is changing. With the advent of globalization, AI, sustainability, the rise of B corporations. We're talking all about this for authors and innovators. What advice do you give to a young BK Fulton who would be thinking about, where do I spend my time? Where do I invest my energy right now?
So a couple of things. That plan was helpful for me, writing the plan, because life is dynamic. Stuff comes up. People before us faced obstacles. I faced obstacles. You faced obstacles. People that are following will face obstacles. And so when stuff comes up, if you've got a plan, does this thing help my plan? If the answer is no, don't do it. If the answer is yes, you can consider it. You don't have to do it, but you can at least consider it. So you stay on path. You stay on trajectory. The other thing I would suggest is don't create the Taj Mahal of this business plan, all this scaffolding that gets so big that you can't act on it. I was talking to the founder of Netflix a little while ago, and Mark was sharing how, when he and Reed Hastings were driving in a car and they made a bet. And he said, okay, I got this DVD, and I'm going to mail it to your house. And if it arrives intact, I'll invest a couple $1 million in you. We'll start this crazy company. Fortunately, it arrived intact. But to think that the thing that we now know as Netflix could have totally not been done because of the mail system is crazy. But I think the critical thing that he shared was, don't build the Taj Mahal of a plan in your head. He said so many entrepreneurs psych themselves out because somebody told them to go make a business plan, so they get this tome that is inactionable or that they don't have the resources for. They talk themselves out of it. Last thing is solve a problem. We all have delusions of grandeur, and we want to be the CEO of this company or that company. Most people don't become CEOs of major, Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 500 companies. I was fortunate. I worked hard, got some doors open. It worked out for me. But I haven't had as much fun as when I've been running my own thing. Because now I'm calling the shots. The team's dependent on me as the leader. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I had enough sense to get out of the way And the problem I was solving was I wanted to tell these stories that help people to become the best version of themselves. So I surrounded myself with people in the business. So I got Spike Lee's #2. I got a guy that worked with Martin Scorsese. I got a kid who was hungry, who was a great writer, an honor student out of one of the local universities. And so we started the magazine. We started doing films. We were the first independent film company to do 4 feature films in our first year. We did, I think, 4 the second year. And so, and then during the pandemic, we still had content. And fortunately, we had started enough before the pandemic so that we were in post-production or about to release when it hit. And then most recently, our film with Uma Thurman and Samuel Jackson, we had finished filming it before the writer's strike and the actor's strike. So there was a bidding war for our film because it was complete. And other people were still getting their stuff together. So timing is fun, but I don't control the time. That's God's department. I just try to make sure that I take advantage of every minute that I have. And I try to make sure that I have fun. That's the last thing. Enjoy it. It's a great journey, especially when you love it. And if you love it, you're not really working, you're having fun.
Oh, great advice. And I want to make sure everyone listening goes out to see The Kill Room, BK's upcoming film, Uma Thurman and Samuel L. Jackson. BK, now that you're doing these films and you continue your life as a storyteller, what other stories are you anxious to tell next?
Oh, my goodness. There's a guy named Charlie Wiggins who was an early pioneer in Indy car racing, so I'm working with a group to tell that story. I think my magnum opus will be a film called Final Four, The Miracle Season. It's about the 1983 NC State Wolfpack team and that championship season.
Wow.
A true Cinderella, winning the big dance, Coach Valvano, and creating the V Foundation. As a matter of fact, we're going to give some of the proceeds to the V Foundation, about 10% actually, because we believe in that much. That part of the reason to do this work is not just to get on the big screen and have your name in lights, but to be more for your community, to be more for the people that you love. And as you start to get our age and get a few gray hairs, you realize it's not about the vanity of self, but about the love of community and the love of something bigger. I want to leave behind pools that I never swim in. So for me, what are the great stories that will inspire people long after I'm gone to keep going? So that's what I want to do.
I love it. And last question, BK, what are you reading these days?
Oh my goodness. I knew you were going to ask me that, so I prepared a short list. So I'm almost finished with The Great Dissenter about Justice John Marshall Harlan, and Walk Through Fire by Sheila Johnson. She was the first African-American female billionaire. Power Broker, Lyndon Johnson's Path to Power. It's a 4-volume set.
Yeah, Caro's set. Yeah, wow.
Reading about the Warner Brothers. And then I'm going to throw in the new Elon Musk book. So I should have all that stuff read in the next couple of months.
The busiest retired man on the planet. BK Fulton, the book is The Blueprint, Lessons for Living Your Best Life. BK, thank you so much for joining us, and I can't wait to see the film, and just can't wait to see what you're going to do next. Thank you again.
Larry, I appreciate it. And look, we have The Wiz, a revival coming out on the 23rd of this month also, and then we'll be in Broadway for 20 weeks. We'll do a national tour for 20 weeks, so check that out as well.
Wow, and the website where people can learn more?
www.solidify, SOULIDIFLY.com.
I hope everyone will check it out. BK Fulton, thank you again.
Thank you, Larry.
We are again speaking with authors who are embracing this year's theme, the changing mindset of business. For so many of our CEOs, the best performers are often those people that can do it all without breaking a sweat as they balance two entirely separate spheres of life and work. But are they? So the brightest stars, however, often burn out in today's fast-paced environment. And to talk more about that, I'm delighted Dr. Neha Sangwan with her new book, Powered by Me, From Burned Out to Fully Charged in Work and Life, is here to talk about her book, through her own lived experience and her deep understanding. Dr. Sangwan is so unique. She is an internal medicine physician. She's been a mechanical engineer. She's now CEO of Intuitive Intelligence, her own consulting and executive coaching business. So we're always interested in talking about authors, innovators, and entrepreneurs. And Neha, you're all three. So tell us a little bit about Powered by Me. How did you experience burnout, and what is it?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the big question globally? We're in this global overwhelm, and I think we just got to demystify this a little bit. So what is burnout? Burnout is a triad. So the way it's described in the research, it's a triad of physical, mental, emotional exhaustion. That goes on for quite a while before the second piece comes in, which is cynicism, where you start to have these thoughts that sound something like some version of, it doesn't really matter how hard I work. It really isn't going to make a difference. And that's almost like an undertow of with you, which then tells you you're heading down a place where you're not getting out of this, right? That level of exhaustion. Now, the other thing that happens when people get cynical is even though they're disconnected, they want to be social, they want to connect to others, they start depersonalizing and distancing themselves from others so that they can conserve their energy. They start behaving in ways that they're cutting corners, even if they're not somebody who cuts corners. But it's literally for survival biologically that they start doing this. And the third piece of the triad is when literally they become ineffective. So they're unable to do whatever it is that they're trying to do. So it's exhaustion, cynicism, and ineffectiveness that are the triad of burnout. And a big mistake people make is blaming the person who's burning out.
Right.
Because that's not it. In fact, people who burn out are usually your highest performers. They're the ones who are trying to get so much done that they have outsmarted their own biology. They're not even listening when all the signals are coming in. So they're the ones who have pushed through themselves so much that now they've hit a wall of ineffectiveness. So that's the short version of what burnout is. And then me, you asked how did I experience this? Nearly 20 years ago, I was a hospital physician, meaning someone comes into the emergency room, they get admitted to the hospital for pneumonia, heart attack, stroke, whatever it is. I'm the doctor who carries them through their stay. So really high intensity. Everybody's so sick. We had 18 patients each.
Wow.
Hospital doctors. So you can imagine it's not just the patients, it's the nurses paging you, it's the family that needs to talk to you. You need to update and communicate, right? And you have to communicate with your colleagues. So anyway, that day, someone had called out sick. And one way that healthcare keeps budget is they don't really create a backup plan. So there's no backup when people are sick. Or
you just do more.
You just do more and you divide it
Wow.
out. You keep dividing it out. So that day I took the Alpha pager, which is air traffic control for all incoming admissions from the surrounding hospitals and my 18 patients. And I remember at 11 a.m., having only seen 2 out of the 16 patients, looking at the nurse and saying, "Hey, Nina, could you please give 40 milliequivalents of IV potassium to the gentleman in 636? And she looked at me and said, "Dr. Sangwan, are you okay?" And it was
Wow.
it was my first indication that I might not be.
Wow.
I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "That is the 4th time you've asked me that question, that same question in under 5 minutes.
Wow.
And I've answered you every time."
Wow.
And so for me, I literally hit the brick wall of not even realizing that I was being ineffective. That was the first time I noticed it. So the people who burn out are the ones who have gotten really good at pushing through their biology, making it over deadlines, and they're missing all the early cues.
One of the things that I particularly enjoyed about Powered by Me is you really do make the reader understand that they need to partner with their body, which is, I think, a theme that comes up again and again. And I felt reading this, and I know everybody will, as if you were talking to me. because you're saying this might not happen to everyone, but I'm going to break this down into these 5 fundamental levels of energy. I want you to think about it this way. And so talk about a little bit for hard charging entrepreneurs and our CEOs who are watching video after video, TED Talk after TED Talk about this never not working culture. That in business, you've got to hustle and you should always be hustling, and it's okay to be sleep deprived. And if you're not going to 15 different presentations, you're not working hard enough. What would you say to them in addition to maybe you need to take the time either to listen to this or to read it?
Yeah. Well, let me tell you where the gap is here. So for the CEOs that are listening and entrepreneurs, you're going to need this pretty soon when you have a huge team that's going to be built for your company. When an employee goes to, they're not feeling well, they go to Employee Assistance Program, EAP.
Right.
EAP sends them to me. I'm a doctor, and I have 2 tools for them. I assess if I think they're burned out or what's happening, and I write them for time off so they can get 60% of their pay while they're recovering. The second tool I have is a cocktail of medications for helping them sleep, taking care of anxiety or depression. So an antidepressant, anti-anxiety, or sleep medication. That's it. So 10 days later or a month later, what you're doing is you're sending people back into the ring for round 2 with no understanding of how they got there or how to do it differently. And we expect them to be recovered. Everybody's waiting, like, when are they going to come back from stress leave? Because we need to get them going, right? So what you're speaking about is the 5 energies, where you are on the spectrum from burned out to fully charged, can be determined by whether you have a net gain or a net drain of energy on a physical, mental, emotional, social, or spiritual level.
I love how you broke that up. Yeah.
I had to create a wide net because how people get to burnout is as unique as their fingerprint. The choices they've made, the environment they're in, their upbringing, the circumstances of the world. And so what I've done is I've demystified burnout, I've personalized it to the individual, and I've given you powerful and practical tools to get to the root of what's happening and heal.
Let me ask a couple of questions because this is all the rage now on Netflix. We're talking about blue zones and the like. Can you talk about some of these areas? I want to talk about what people eat, what they put into their bodies, because you talk about that, and then I want to talk a little bit about exercise. And I want you to speak to that entrepreneur who says, "I don't have time. I got to eat out. I got to do this fast. I just don't have time to exercise."
Okay. So the first thing I'll say is it's all connected. One of the big things I hear from CEOs and entrepreneurs is, I'll sleep when I'm dead, I'll sleep on the weekend.
Right.
And when they need more time in the day, what they usually do is cut it out of sleep. And so what I want them to know is, if they think sleep is a waste of time, and they're thinking that they're not getting anything done on their external to-do list, they're right. Except what they don't understand is their body has an internal to-do list. And there's 3 main things that happen when you sleep. Physical repair of not only your muscles, but more importantly, your immune function. So what is going to keep you healthy and keep you going must repair itself while you sleep. Number 2, integration and memory consolidation so you can take in and retain everything you've absorbed that day. The third thing that's happening when you sleep is emotional processing. All the stress that you take every day and you absorb, that gets processed. It's called like a limbic system flush. And if you start cutting out sleep, the first thing that your body will focus on is what? What do you think? Physical repair, memory consolidation, or emotional processing?
Right, almost all 3. You're going to be bad at all 3.
It will prioritize emotional processing, and it will let go of physical repair and memory consolidation. You're going to start forgetting things. You're going to get sick. You're going to catch COVID. You're going to do something that's going to knock you out. So this food, you said food and movement. I'm telling you it's all connected because I want you to know that you would never ask a high-performance race car to run on jam or jelly in its tank. And so the quality of fuel that you're giving your body determines the clarity of your thinking. It determines how much energy you have. It determines whether you can go on that run or go on a walk and have the energy. Now, movement. Why movement is so important, you have something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's the energy currency of your body. When you work out, adenosine splits from 3 phosphates, and adenosine goes up to your brain and helps you sleep better at night. So your movement is connected to your energy that you got from what you ate, whether you feel like you can move. And when you move, you sleep better. So wherever you start making a positive shift, it's going to affect all the other places. So it's a win-win. And I got to say, on the flip side, whatever you're not paying attention to is also affecting the others.
I also like where you take the reader towards the end and that spiritual energy, helping people understand big picture. You got here for a reason.
Yep.
Is it because you're trying to suss out, why do I matter? What are the things that I'm trying to navigate? Can you talk a little bit about how someone walking through this book can use what they've learned to assess that level of energy?
Yeah, so I think spiritual energy is, but you might be thinking, why is she talking about spiritual energy in a book that's on business? Because it's the most fundamental level of everything else. It's about what matters most to you. What moves you? What inspires you? What do you value? Once you understand, just like for your company, you have a company purpose, you have company values. What is it that are the guidelines when you have to make complex decisions? What framework, what scaffolding are you using to decide? So once you know your highest values, what I also speak about in the spiritual section is, where do you take risks?
Right.
Where do you not take risks? And in a world that's moving as fast as ours, where you need agility as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, you need your people to be able to change and pivot on a dime. They need to be able to be agile. Where self-trust comes in is where they trust themselves and where they trust you is where they will take risks and follow, where they will take risks and innovate, where your team together will be able to navigate the world moving this quickly. And the other pieces on spiritual are, once you understand your values, your highest values, it will help you make decisions quickly. Complex decisions will be made quickly, not just for what's good right now, but what's good for the short term and the long term. And you're also going to be paying attention not only to what's good for you, what's good for your stakeholders and your shareholders. So there's going to be a much wider lens that you use as you make these complex decisions that serves you over time.
So relevant. It's really a guidebook to yourself, and that's what I found. Every chapter, I almost had to put it away and say, what did I take from that? And you've also got handy checklists and the like. Now, what are you reading or watching these days? In addition to your very, very busy life at Intuitive Intelligence, what are you thinking about? What are you reading? What are you watching?
Well, I will tell you, I'm on book tour with my partner, Rod, and I did just finish his book, Awaken, which is a
wonderful book. Wonderful book.
Incredible. And what I listened to, which is unlike me, because I don't usually do this, I'm not a big royal family fan, I listened to Prince Harry, his memoir, Spare. And what I will tell you that is so interesting, there's a lot of controversy around it all and all of that. But what I do is whenever there's controversy, I pay attention to N=1, me. So I listen and I pay attention, does body language align with tone and words? And if so, what do I think about all the noise that's being created? So what I found was that in a world that's moving in the way that ours is, there are people who stand in their personal power even when it's not popular. And they're often playing the long game. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have a vision that you want to see borne out in the world, and people are going to tell you you can't do it. As a CEO, you're going to make decisions about hybrid work or other such entities where half the people are not going to agree with you. And I believe what Spare taught me was what personal power takes what it takes to stand in your personal power. And I thought that was really riveting. And you said, what am I watching? The last one that I'd say that is insanely riveting is The Wisdom of Trauma by Gabor Mate. Fascinating. If you've ever wondered, what is all this talk about trauma, and do we all have it, or is that just for people who have come back, veterans from war? No, the answer is every single one of us has it.
Right.
And the way he, as an MD, breaks this down and makes it so doable and so understandable, I think as a world, this is going to be one of those must-watches. So The Wisdom of Trauma by Gabor Mate is the movie. The book was Spare, and Awakened by Raj Sisodia.
Wow. Wow. Lots of food for thought. A book that everyone should read. Powered by me, from burned out to fully charged in work and life. Dr. Neha Sangwan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.